Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your primetime destination. News, newsmakers, talking points, another big news day. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's big message to Pakistan is addressed to the nation. The Modi doctrine, terror and talks cannot coexist, nor can blood and water. India will be undeterred by nuclear blackmail. You hit us, we'll hit you back and treat it as an act of war. How will this actually operate on the ground? What is really the big message of the Modi doctrine? All that and more on this News Today special. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed the nation for the first time since the Pahalgam terror strike and Operation Sindhur. The Prime Minister has made it clear India won't take nuclear blackmail from Pakistan lying down. The Prime Minister made it clear this was only a pause in the fight against terrorists in Pakistan. Prime Minister claimed Pakistan was the one which went begging for an exit route and had assured action on terror and pleaded for a ceasefire. The Prime Minister claims that India has achieved an objective of demolishing terror infrastructure. Prime Minister claimed Operation Sindhur is a pledge for justice and India was united and would not allow those trying to use terror to divide people. Strong messages from the Prime Minister also saying that this fight is not just against terror but also against the sponsors of terror. A direct message in a way to the Pakistani army state that any terror strike will effectively now be seen as an act of war against India. Take a look at what the Prime Minister said.
कोई भी न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल भारत नहीं सहेगा। न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल की आड़ में पनप रहे आतंकी ठिकानों पर भारत सटीक और निर्णायक प्रहार करेगा। तीसरा, हम आतंक की सरपरस्त सरकार और आतंक के आकाओं को अलग अलग नहीं देखेंगे। मैं आज विश्व समुदाय को भी कहूंगा, हमारी घोषित नीति रही है, अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो टेररिज्म पर ही होगी। अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर पीओके उस पर ही होगी। पाकिस्तानी फौज, पाकिस्तान की सरकार जिस तरह आतंकवाद को खाद पानी दे रहे हैं, वो एक दिन पाकिस्तान को ही समाप्त कर देगा। पाकिस्तान को अगर बचना है तो उसे अपने टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का सफाया करना ही होगा। इसके अलावा शांति का कोई रास्ता नहीं है। भारत की आक्रामक कार्रवाई के बाद पाकिस्तान बचने के रास्ते खोजने लगा। पाकिस्तान दुनिया भर में तनाव कम करने के लिए गुहार लगा रहा था और बुरी तरह पीटने के बाद इसी मजबूरी में 10 मई की दोपहर को पाकिस्तानी सेना ने हमारे डीजीएमओ को संपर्क किया। तब तक हम आतंकवाद के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को बड़े पैमाने पर तबाह कर चुके थे। आतंकियों को मौत के घाट उतार दिया गया था। पाकिस्तान के सीने में बसाए गए आतंक के अड्डों को हमने खंडहर बना दिया था। इसलिए जब पाकिस्तान की तरफ से गुहार लगाई गई, पाकिस्तान की तरफ से जब ये कहा गया कि उसकी ओर से आगे कोई आतंकी गतिविधि और सैन्य दुस्साहस नहीं दिखाया जाएगा, तो भारत ने भी उस पर विचार किया। भारत का मत एकदम स्पष्ट है। टेरर और टॉक एक साथ नहीं हो सकते। टेरर और ट्रेड एक साथ नहीं चल सकते, और पानी और खून भी एक साथ नहीं बह सकता। जब पाकिस्तान में आतंक के अड्डों पर भारत की मिसाइलों ने हमला बोला, भारत के ड्रोन्स ने हमला बोला, तो आतंकी संगठनों की इमारतें नहीं, बल्कि उनका हौसला भी थर्रा गया। बहावलपुर और मुरिद के जैसे आतंकी ठिकाने एक प्रकार से ग्लोबल टेररिज्म की यूनिवर्सिटीज रही है। दुनिया में कहीं पर भी जो बड़े आतंकी हमले हुए हैं, चाहे 9/11 हो, चाहे लंदन ट्यूब बॉम्बिंग हो, या भारत में दशकों से जो बड़े बड़े आतंकी हमले हुए हैं, उन सब के तार कहीं ना कहीं आतंक के इन्हीं ठिकानों से जुड़ते रहे हैं। आतंकियों ने हमारी बहनों का सिंदूर उजाड़ा था, इसलिए भारत ने आतंक के ये हेडक्वार्टर्स उजाड़ दिए। भारत के इन हमलों में 100 से अधिक खूंखार आतंकवादियों को मौत के घाट उतारा गया है। आतंक के बहुत सारे आका बीते 2.5-3 दशकों से खुलेआम पाकिस्तान में घूम रहे थे, जो भारत के खिलाफ साजिशें करते थे। उन्हें भारत ने एक झटके में खत्म कर दिया। दुनिया ने पाकिस्तान का वो घिनौना सच फिर देखा है, जब मारे गए आतंकियों को विदाई देने पाकिस्तानी सेना के बड़े बड़े अफसर उमड़ पड़े। स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड टेररिज्म का ये बहुत बड़ा सबूत है। हम भारत और अपने नागरिकों को किसी भी खतरे से बचाने के लिए लगातार निर्णायक कदम उठाते रहेंगे।
Strong words from Prime Minister Modi, but the big question, how will this Modi doctrine now rein in Pakistan-based terror? Have we now drawn a new red line with our neighbor, our hostile neighbor? That's the question that Narendra Modi's tough words will raise. Joining me now is Raj Chengappa, editorial director at India Today, joins me, veteran of covering many India-Pakistan stories. I'm also joined by another veteran, Dr. Sanjay Baru, veteran journalist and someone who was part of Manmohan Singh's Prime Minister's office, and Geeta Mohan, our diplomatic affairs editor, who I'm going to first. Geeta, how is this speech being now seen? The strong words by the Prime Minister. What kind of reactions are we getting at the moment, particularly from all the diplomats and others you've been speaking to?
Well, too early for reactions to come in, Rajdeep. We'll start rolling out reactions in just a while from now. But yes, it just comes after the big announcement by US President Donald Trump. Having said that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, for the first time, made the entire policy official. For the past 2 days, we've been saying on the basis of sources that the government has shifted its stance and its policy, saying that act of terror will now be considered as an act of war. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spelled that out in no uncertain words. So that's very important. It's not just a shift, Rajdeep, it's also a message to the world and to those who were saying and thinking that there was a lot of pressure that was being mounted on India, that if there's an act of terror, there is going to be a military response. The world can think what they want to, the world can say what they want to, but please do not call New Delhi to say de-escalate. If they want de-escalation, it should happen from the perpetrators. And here he said the Akas, the ones behind the terror attacks, which he meant was the Pakistani state and the establishment. So that's a clear message.
The University of Terror. The University of Terror, as he's called it, they are the ones who have, and he widened its scope, Raj Chengappa, not just to include what happened to India, but across the world, that this is a country which for decades now has been sponsoring terror. How do you interpret that message? Do we now have a new strategic doctrine in place which says enough of diplomatic restraint? We will now treat every terror attack as an act of war. Operation Sindhur is the new normal.
Well, I think let's call it more on the red lines, right? Strategic doctrines, you could term it in various other ways. And if you look at that, first is that the quantum of punishment is a dramatic improvement, I mean, escalation over what happened in Balakot. You are hitting one camp and mainly foot soldiers. Here you're now virtually cutting the head of the snake off, right? You're hitting the headquarters of lashkar-e-taiba as well as jaish-e-mohammed. And the second big message is, so you're going after the leaders. You are not, just trying to make a hit at the ground level. The second, I think, big thing is geography is not a constraint. There is no place to hide. We will hit you wherever you are. And that's the big message that's there. And the third is a big message for Pakistan, that we're willing to get into Punjab, which is your heartland, close to the capital. We'll strike you where it hurts you the most. We are unafraid of your nuclear blackmail that you thought you'd always get away with. And the other aspect is that, when it came to toughness in terms of what ahead, he was very clear that there will be no, terror. I mean, no talks of this terror still. In terms of trade also, we're going to cut off. And he also mentioned blood and water will not mix, which means that the Indus water is going to be an issue as we look ahead. And very, very interestingly, also mentioned POK. There was one aspect of it, which I think Pakistan should take note of, that he talked of the fact that Pakistan themselves will have to come to terms and cleanse themselves. So there is an opening in terms of the development side that Pakistan must now move in a different direction. And that's very valid because I feel if you have to really get away from the trap that they're in, Pakistan must start focusing on development. There are a virtual basket case that is...
So there's a very, very tough message to Pakistan in the Prime Minister's message, not just limited to non-state actors, as the terrorists were called, but to the Pakistani army state as well. That's the distinction. Until now, Pakistan has tried to make a distinction between non-state actors, i.e. the terrorist groups, and the state of Pakistan. The Prime Minister is not making that distinction anymore. I want to come to you, Dr. Sanjay Baru. Are we seeing, therefore, a radical departure from how previous governments dealt with terror? Now the Prime Minister is claiming Operation Sindhur is the new normal. You hit us, we will come right into your heartland and strike you undeterred by nuclear blackmail.
Well, I mean, Rajdeep, first of all, we have still not found out who these terrorists were in Pahalgam who came and killed 26 Indians. They are still at large. We don't know who exactly they are, where did they come. I think I understand entirely the Prime Minister's approach, the government's approach under the circumstances. But I think going forward, it's very important for us to be careful that we do not destabilize the region by reacting in this manner to every terror attack. I mean, we are then giving the initiative to random terrorists. After all, how many people are involved in Pahalgam? 5, 6? I mean, you can get a group of terrorists staging a terror attack and then put two nations at war. So I'm not convinced that this is a doctrine that can be sustained. You can have another terror attack day after tomorrow, and then again we are back at war. So I think we need a long-term strategy to deal with Pakistan. This has been the argument. I mean, this has been the view of Prime Minister Vajpayee, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in the past, that while terrorism is there under so many governments, from the Narasimha Rao's time, we have seen terrorism. But what is a long-term solution? Threatening Pakistan, I understand, under the circumstances. Warning Pakistan that will go after you if you do it again is entirely understandable. But if we are subject to random attacks by elements that we cannot identify, after all, we have not yet identified the elements in Pahalgam, then are we exposing our country to continuous destabilization? Is this a wise long-term strategy for India and Pakistan? That's the one question I would like to pose to the government. Second, I think the fact is that the response of the international community for the very first time was fundamentally different from the past. You look at the way in which the world reacted in November 2008 when we had the Mumbai attack, and or even in the Balakot, and this time. I mean, could the International Monetary Fund not have postponed its meeting at least by a week and said that, look, there are hostilities between these two countries, let's meet a week later? They met in the middle of hostilities. That was a message to India. So, and then today, Trump's remarks just before the Prime Minister's address, that he got in and separated the two. I think, these are all questions that the current situation poses, to which we do not have clear answers.
Let me bring in a guest who's joining us from Washington at the moment. I'm joined by Michael Rubin, former Pentagon official, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Rubin. But before that, just to let you know that US President Donald Trump a short while ago spoke, and he too, on India and Pakistan, gave us some breaking news. Trump said he was the one who stopped a nuclear conflict. That was the breaking news that came in a little while ago. Trump said, I told both sides to stop fighting. Trump claims he pressured India and Pakistan for a ceasefire and will do a lot of trade now with both. Just listen to what Donald Trump said, and then I'll get a reaction from my guest in Washington.
On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. And I'm very proud to let you know that the leadership of India and Pakistan was unwavering, powerful, but unwavering in both cases, and having these. They really were, from the standpoint of having the strength and the wisdom and fortitude to fully know and to understand the gravity of the situation. And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And
Michael Rubin, how are we to see what Donald Trump said a while ago? Is America truly playing the role here of an honest deal maker? Or is this Donald Trump simply not following any process when he claims credit for bringing this conflict to at least a pause at the moment?
Well, the thing to understand about Donald Trump is that he also single-handedly won the Cricket World Cup. He landed on the moon, and he invented the internet. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump is prone to exaggeration, and he's also speaking to the American audience. He shouldn't be taken literally. I am absolutely sure, however, that the United States was scrambling behind the scenes to try to pass messages along and to try to derail any escalation that could lead to unrestricted warfare. So I wouldn't, I think it's a little bit untoward, it's impolite, it's navel-gazing for Donald Trump to try to claim credit for everything. It does India a disservice and Pakistan a disservice. The last thing is what I would read into Donald Trump's comments is still a troubling deference to moral equivalency between India and Pakistan in terms of who was the aggressor and who was the victim.
That's a great point you made there, Michael. Is that a worry, though, that Donald Trump, and that's a worry here in New Delhi, that here is an American president not making a distinction between the perpetrators of terror, and not just terror against India, but as Prime Minister Modi enunciated, against the world. This is the same country that housed Osama bin Laden. So does Donald Trump need a lesson, in a sense, in South Asian geopolitics when he tries to equate India and Pakistan, the perpetrator of terror, with the victim of terror here? And why is he
Well, I
doing
think,
it?
first of all, we saw that Donald Trump needs a lesson in South Asia when he said that this conflict had been going on for more than 1,000 years across the border. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump doesn't know the details. He's often speaking from the cuff. The good news is, however, he has a strong relation with Prime Minister Modi, and he also has a team which understands the reality of South Asia much more than the president does. And so then the question is, how do you allow the President of the United States to save face while getting spun up to speed on the situation? We have seen, for example, in American reporting, that in the more than 100 days which Donald Trump has been in office, he has skipped all but 12 of his presidential daily briefs, the daily CIA briefings about world affairs. Perhaps he really does need an education right now.
And the point that you make also in a tweet I saw, that here is a president who failed to stop Pakistan, the nuclear threat which has been held out from time to time whenever there's been a conflict between India and Pakistan. Today, Prime Minister Modi making it very clear, we will not be deterred by nuclear blackmail. Does Donald Trump recognize the dangers that, dare I call it, a rogue army state in Pakistan holds while it has the nuclear button, and therefore needs to send them a tough message?
Put it this way. He will ultimately understand this. I worry about the damage that could be done before he doesn't. And you know what? His legacy, if he's not careful, is not only going to be the exasperation of the situation in Pakistan, but it's also going to be Pakistan transforming Bangladesh into a twin of state sponsorship of terror. And so, look, every president since George H.W. Bush had his foreign policy legacy defined by the crisis which no one saw coming during his campaign. And Donald Trump is no different. He wasn't thinking about India or Pakistan when he was campaigning against Kamala Harris. However, the way he reacts now is really going to be how history judges him. He's dug himself into a bit of a hole, but it's not too late to dig out and recognize the reality. But I would also put some of the onus for educating Donald Trump on Prime Minister Modi. He has a personal relationship. He needs to use it. The historical analogy I would make is when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990. President George H.W. Bush wasn't sure how to respond. And Margaret Thatcher, with whom he had a personal relationship, said, "Don't go wobbly on me now, George." We need a similar moment between Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump.
I'll come back to you in a moment, Michael, because you're making very, very strong and very important points. But Raj Chengappa, this is precisely the problem. Prime Minister Modi has enunciated the Modi doctrine very clearly, that there's a red line that we've drawn in a way with Pakistan-based terror. The world needs to wake up to it. We've just heard the US president once again hyphenating India and Pakistan, saying he wants to do trade with both great nations. Is that, in a sense, part of where India is going to have to navigate this very closely? Yes, every act of terror is a provocation, but how far can you go when dealing with an unstable Pakistani army state? Is that the concern that we still have to have going forward?
Well, the evaluation of the entire Operation Sindhur, as well as the Pakistan response. There is a lot of, lack of clarity. Let's still say the fog of war exists as to what really happened. And if you look at the comments that both President Trump and his Deputy Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, talked about, you will see that he talks of a meeting that we are supposed to have, India is supposed to have with Pakistan on neutral grounds and with key issues. Where is the dissonance coming from? Because the Indians denied fully, and the Pakistanis, of course, were quite happy that America is getting involved. So I'm not very clear where this, I did try to find out how did this all emanate. Certainly, Marco, his Secretary of State and Donald Trump would have played a role in calming things down. We do know that the Secretary of State did go and speak to, or did call General Asim Munir. And what were the circumstances that led it? What we can see is evidence that, one, India had made some decisive strikes. Two, that India had achieved its objectives in the first 30 minutes of the war itself, we would like to call it, when it struck the camps in Muridke and Bawalpur, and therefore, inflicted pain and kept to it. So after that was all escalatory steps that Pakistan was taking. And if you see the final step where India hits the air bases hard, was that a moment of panic for Asim Munir, and therefore he ran to the, as they say, cry uncle,
No,
cry for the uncle and
that's
go.
what Mr. Modi says. Mr. Modi says Pakistan begged the world to end this conflict.
But let us also be, if you look at it, India had actually right through said we do not want to escalate it beyond the first strike that we did. And Pakistan, after doing what it had to do, was also looking for an exit ramp. But the problem was, I think it had escalated so rapidly to a point that when two nuclear powers clash like this, mistakes of any kind would be disastrous, not just for India and the world. So I don't know where the context is coming from, but certainly, America getting into this picture and Trump, I mean, you always have to take Donald Trump with a pinch of salt.
I think you made a very important point, which Sanjay Baru also made, and I want to press on that, because today we are discussing this Modi doctrine. If I may be, he's not used that word. I'm calling it that when he says Operation Sindhur is the new normal. The worry, of course, is that yes, while we need to send a tough message to Pakistan, it can also result in misadventure. You, Dr. Baru, were part of regimes that spoke of strategic restraint. Now, that did not deter Pakistan. We had 26/11. We've had attacks on our parliament. So Mr. Modi is taking us in a new direction. Now, surely if what happened in the past didn't work, maybe we've got to try the Modi way of teaching Pakistan a lesson.
Yes, I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I mean, that is why there was national unity on this issue. The opposition political parties also supported the government on the action they were taking. So I don't think that the debate is about whether the government was right or wrong in doing what it did. I think the real issues are going forward. If this is the approach that after every terror attack, we will go and hit, you are giving the initiative to the terrorists, and we don't know who these terrorists are. We have alleged that they are coming from Pakistan, but we still don't know who these chaps who came into Pahalgam are. And tomorrow you could have another attack in other parts of the country. After all, they came from across the sea to Mumbai in 2008. If we lock ourselves into this strategy that you hit me, I will hit you back, then we are getting into a spiral of destabilization of the subcontinent. And I don't think that's in the long term the right strategy. Right. In the long term, we need a strategy that stabilizes the subcontinent. Now, what is that strategy? It's for people in government to think about. What is it that
the fact, if I'm, the fact is, over the last 3 decades, we've not been able to find that strategy with Pakistan in particular.
That's not the point, Rajdeep. Let me finish. I mean, yes, we have tried one strategy in the past that didn't work. We are trying another strategy now. It may or may not work. But I do think there are serious issues. There are serious issues about what exactly is the final solution. Now, what is the final solution? Is the occupation? One minute. Is the occupation of POK the final solution? After all, the Indian Parliament has said that. Amit Shah has said that we will go and take back POK. Is that the final solution? Is that what the international community will support us on? Of course not. And we have had an issue this time that world opinion is not fully convinced about the strategy we have adopted. So there are issues. I'm not
Can I?
criticizing the government for doing what they did. After all, they have more information than all of us. But going forward, will this strategy be a stable strategy, or will it destabilize the subcontinent? That's the concern I have.
I take your point, and I think you raise a valid concern that I want you, Kanwal Sibal, to address. Michael, I'll come to you in a moment. Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, joining us. Sanjay Baru is raising a concern. Yes, Modi doctrine, tough kinetic action, but is there an end game? As we saw even with Operation Sindhur, suddenly, just as we had bombed Pakistan air bases, few hours later we had pulled out and agreed to an understanding with Pakistan. Is there a fear that this doctrine sounds very good, but how do you get off an escalatory spiral when you're dealing with Pakistan? How do you see the Prime Minister's speech, Mr. Sibal?
Well, I have not heard the speech, but I see on the takeaways that you are publishing just now.
Yes.
And I think it's a very tough message. And I see it as a message to Trump because Trump has, to my mind, unnecessarily gone out of his way to put pressure on India, of equating India and Pakistan politically, militarily, morally, trying to internationalize the Kashmir issue, offering mediation. And his line, obviously, will give incentive to Pakistan not to draw the right lessons from what has happened, as well as other partners of the United States. It's unfortunate.
But do you support,
I think Prime Minister has
sir,
set the record straight.
But do you support the essence of the Modi doctrine that every act of terror will now effectively be seen as an act of war, that we will not just spare the terrorists, we will also strike against their sponsors? So we will go into air bases in Pakistan, we will go into Bawalpur, Muridke. Do you support that, or do you believe this can lead to miscalculations?
No, I don't think that this is the meaning of what Prime Minister is saying. I mean, if it's a minor attack, let's say a chap from other parts of India is killed in Jammu and Kashmir, as it has happened, some local Kashmiris are killed. It depends on the nature, the size of the attack. And then we have to decide whether it is an attack that merits a strong response from us. True, it is a difficult proposition. Even if there's a small attack, you can't go and start bombing their bases, because then there is a big cost that everyone pays. But there'll now be a great inhibition on the part of Pakistan, unless, of course, we think that
You think this will deter Pakistan? You think this will deter Pakistan? You think this will deter Pakistan?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They must have also drawn the right lessons from what has happened, just as we are drawing some lessons that we should be very careful in not treating every act of terrorism as an act of war, and we have to take the longer-term implications of this in view. Pakistan has to think twice, even more, in terms of provoking India.
Okay. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that, Mr. Rubio, that this approach of a kinetic doctrine, some are likening it already in their reactions to what Israel does, hits at Gaza whenever there is any terror attack? Of course, what happened in October 2023 was of another level. Do you believe, Mr. Rubin, we can do that effectively, that we can actually have this kind of muscular doctrine that the Prime Minister has enunciated? Is that the way the world should deal with terror, Mr. Rubin?
I absolutely believe that's the way the world should be with terror. And then, at the very least, you claim the right to do this, and if you choose not to, that's something for down the road. But, look, terrorism is a cost-benefit analysis. That's why its sponsors embrace it as a tactic. You raise the cost, and it's going to cause some serious doubt. But, in reality, is it going to be enough to end the problem? Here's where I dispense with any moral equivalency. Look, the problem India faces, and for that matter the world faces, is only going to end when Pakistan fundamentally reforms the mess that its state has become. It's only going to fundamentally abandon terrorism when civilians gain true control and the military is put back in its place. You know, there's been two recent conflicts, one between Russia and Ukraine, and the Russian army hasn't been held accountable internally in terms of reforms and so forth for its corruption and its miscalculation. Then there was the Azerbaijan-Armenia war of 2020, where the Armenian military lost badly, and the defense minister for all of his miscalculations and alleged corruption, today is in prison in Armenia. The question now in Islamabad is whether Asim Munir is going to be held accountable. But ultimately, peace and stability will only come when the Pakistanis hold themselves accountable rather than try to distract the world and their own public by continuing sponsoring terrorism and attacking India.
So let me just take that to you, that if tomorrow, God forbid, there is something similar to what happens in Pahalgam, and India decides, as the Modi doctrine says, that we're going to hit you back, will the US fully support us? Because in this particular three-day conflict, as we keep saying, they showed this equivalence. Will that change? And what you're saying, Prime Minister Modi now needs to speak to Donald Trump and wake him up to the reality. Am I right?
Ultimately, I think the United States will support India, but you're absolutely right. Prime Minister Modi and various diplomats, as well as members of President Trump's inner circle, need to give President Trump an education quickly and make him understand that he's actually making the situation worse by extending a lifeline to Pakistan.
Let me give a final word to you then, Kanwal Sibal. Do you believe that that is one of the challenges for India's diplomats, to go across the world and say that, particularly to Washington, that this equivalence, you've been a former ambassador there, that this equivalence will no longer do? Because if that equivalence is retained, then this entire Modi doctrine simply doesn't, simply won't be able to have that kind of impact it needs to have to get Pakistan to end sponsoring terror.
Well, frankly, I'm a bit puzzled and disappointed by the position that President Trump has taken. But then President Trump blows hot and cold. He doesn't focus on the complexities of the issues. He's whimsical, he's unpredictable. And what he's done can potentially do great damage to the trust building between India and the United States, because he's touching the raw nerves of India. And he's actually contradicting the basis, the core of Indian foreign policy when it comes to dealing with the Kashmir issue and with Pakistan. Huge error. We have people around him who understand the issues, and I hope they can influence him and educate him, as was rightly said, so that he doesn't put more and more his foot into his mouth. It's very unfortunate what he's doing, and he's putting us before a very, very difficult challenge at a time when we are committed to enlarging and deepening our relations with the United States, and things look pretty good after the visit of our Prime Minister there. So one is very perplexed as to why he has taken the position he has taken, even to the point where absurdly suggesting that I'll end trade with both countries if they don't agree on a permanent ceasefire. Okay. US trade with Pakistan is only $7 billion. With us, it's $200 billion. Is this a responsible politician speaking? Is it a responsible attitude of the President of the United States? I mean, it's very possible. Step back from it.
I'm going to end it here. I think all of you have made very strong points, which I hope someone both in the White House and here is listening to. Mr. Rubin, thank you very much. You were excellent, and you've given some very strong comments. We look forward to having you in the future. Sanjay Baru, Raj Chengappa, Kanwal Sibal, for giving us your initial comments. Of course, it will take time to digest this whole Modi doctrine, my word, not necessarily the Prime Minister's, the tough talk that he gave today. But terror and talks don't go together, neither do blood and water. I think those words will resonate. I appreciate my guests joining me. Let's take a look now at the military aspect of this, because the Indian Armed Forces today once again reiterated that only terrorists and terror infrastructure were targeted in Operation Sindhur, and that India's fight was not against Pakistan's military, but against its terror infrastructure. Remember, because Pakistan supported the terrorists, that's why the military infrastructure was struck. Air Marshal A.K. Bharti confirming that all Indian military bases remain intact, fully operational, and that Indian side incurred only minor losses. The Indian Armed Forces also reiterating that Pakistan drone and rocket attacks failed to pierce India's multi-tiered air defense system, also making it clear that Pakistan's nuclear installations were not targeted. And during Operation Sindhur, Chinese PL-15 missiles, Turkish drones were destroyed. The forces categorically denying reports that Indian Air Force struck the Kirana Hills in Pakistan in Punjab. Remember, this is a long speculated to have Islamabad's or Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. How is this now, this Modi doctrine being seen by our armed forces? We heard from diplomats and analysts. Let's turn to armed forces. Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, former Director General Military Operations with us. Air Marshal Sanjeev Kapoor, former Director General Air Safety at the IAF with us. Sandeep Unithan is still with us. I appreciate all of you joining us. General Bhatia, your sense, is this now Prime Minister Modi saying, I'm giving the armed forces now far greater liberty to strike inside Pakistan, including into Punjab, if Pakistan resorts to a major terror strike against India?
Yes, I think this is very clear now. The political military will, political military capability has been demonstrated, and we have achieved all our aims which were laid down for Operation Sindhur. And it's been done at a minor cost to us, and Pakistan realized that the cost of consequences of terror as a weapon under the nuclear umbrella, nuclear rhetoric, nuclear blackmail will no longer be tolerated, and the nuclear factor has now been disconnected with terror and the reply to the terror.
General Bhatia, allow me to push that. Has it been disconnected? Because if it was disconnected, then why didn't we take a step? If we had got, as is being claimed, Pakistan on its knees by striking their air bases, then why were we also so ready to agree to an agreement on the very same day? If, as you're saying, we're not worried about the nuclear deterrent.
See, militarily, if you look at it, what have we done? Firstly, we hit 9 terror camps. Okay, it's a terrorist thing. The 3P strategy, as I call it, proactive, punitive, and preemptive. Right? So it was punitive and preemptive ops which went in on the 6-7 night. And thereafter, when our military installations were targeted, what we did was took out the air defense umbrella. The 11 bases which were struck, Pakistan was devoid of the air defense, and they had no choice but to then call up India and say, okay, let us have a cessation of hostilities. Let us not cessation of hostilities. Let us not ceasefire agreement anymore. Right? There was never a ceasefire agreement in any case. Let us agree upon ceasefire between the two DGMOs. So what I'm trying to say is, we have demonstrated not a political military will, a synchronization which has not been done earlier in as many, this thing in surgical strikes was done. Balakot, it was achieved to an operational level. But this is totally different. This is carrying it to the next level, actually. So Pakistan paid for it. And I think the nuclear factor under which Pakistan for the last 3.5 decades or 3 decades now has carried on with the terror, that has been removed now. The primes are very clear. Nuclear rhetoric, nuclear blackmail will not be tolerated. So that is where we were restrained, and now that strategic restraint is not there anymore.
Let me take that to Air Marshal Kapoor. Air Marshal Kapoor, do you agree with what you just heard from the former DGMO, that India now no longer will be deterred by nuclear blackmail? That's one big message that the Prime Minister has given today, and that he General Bhatia believes Operation Sindhur has achieved. We can go right into the heart of Punjab, Pakistan Punjab, into a Bawalpur, into a Muridke, into a Rawalpindi, and strike at will.
Yes, we can. And this picture which you are just flashing right away is just indicating that a dome of a particular specified target has been taken out. In my opinion, Rajdeep, what has rattled the world is the way our indigenous things were put into use in this operation. The developed products in-house with our own coding, with our own chips, with our own software, without taking help of any outside agency, and this is what has rattled the world the most. Now, if you see, the West has never criticized Pahalgam or the losses in other ways, because somewhere it indicates that their own products are not as good. So the Chinese, the Americans, the French, and the other NATO allies, their products,
foreign media, Air Marshal Kapoor, with due regard, foreign media is claiming that some of these Chinese jets have caused huge damage to us. These are being done by very responsible foreign media. So, I mean, are we telling the full story there? Is there equivalence in air power, or is it one-sided?
No, it is not one-sided. If you recall, the 8th and the 9th night, we took out all the air defense system and radars. And where did this product come from? Why were we able to go smoothly inside and attack on the 10th, early morning? The 10th of May would be a defining day in the air power history, and in the years to come, it will be taught in the history books that in precisely 90 minutes, 11 frontline air bases were taken out. It has never happened in the history of aviation. And not only one, they were precise targets with a CEP of 1 meter. And this was done by indigenously developed weapons. And this is the message which the world should get. And when the Prime Minister was speaking now, he was mentioning the same thing. He was mentioning the same thing. And when he spoke in Bihar the other day in English, it was for the world. And today when he spoke now, most of the message was for the world. So he wants to tell that the path to peace goes through hostilities. And that is what he meant, that we have to rise in power and we have to be, self-sufficient to be a world leader, what he's envisaging.
Okay, let me get in Sandeep Unithan. Yes, Sandeep has tracked defense for years. Sandeep, what did you see so different from a defense perspective in what the Prime Minister said today from what you've heard from previous Prime Ministers?
Rajdeep, what Prime Minister Modi said today was historic. What he's basically said is that he's not going to be deterred by nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism. Now, this is a Damocles sword that the Pakistan military had hung over the political establishment, the Indian political establishment, for decades. Right from the time of General Ziaul Haq, the Pakistani bombs were not meant to deter the Indian military. The Indian military is fully capable of fighting through a nuclear war. The Pakistani bomb was meant to deter the Indian political class. They achieved deterrence when the first F-16 flew with a bomb under its belly, somewhere, we believe, in the late 80s to the early 90s, which is when our nuclear weapons program was pulled out of the closet and they started developing those nuclear weapons. But to Pakistan's ability over the last couple of decades, they have managed to hold our massive conventional edge at bay using nuclear weapons. And the last time this happened was in Op Parakram 2001-2002, where that massive deployment happened 6 months. And after which a very, very significant speech was made by Lieutenant General Khalid Kidwai, who was the head of the Pakistan's Strategic Plans Division, where he enunciated the 4 red lines based on which Pakistan would use nuclear weapons if those 4 thresholds were crossed. Basically, if you capture territory, destroy their military infrastructure, economically strangulate them, or foment internal disturbance. So the point they were trying to make is that you try and do any of these, we are going to use the bomb on you. So, and the most important thing, Rajiv, to understand is that the Pakistani nuclear weapons program began in the 70s under Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. It was meant to protect Pakistan from dismemberment, further dismemberment after the 1971 war. But somewhere down in the 80s and in the 90s, when they launched a wave of terror attacks against India, there was no conventional military response. The Pakistani military believed it had achieved deterrence using its nuclear weapons. And that is when, from an instrument of state survival, it became an instrument of enabling terrorism. That is when this malicious strategy of nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism began. 3 decades, successive Indian prime ministers, from Prime Minister Vajpayee to Manmohan Singh, had no answer to this. They would always stop short of ordering military strikes. But here you have today an Indian prime minister, the first Indian prime minister who has authorized the use of the Indian Air Force. At the very outset, he has ordered airstrikes on Pakistan, unprecedented. You heard the Air Marshal say that 90 minutes, 11 airfields. The Indian Air Force has never undertaken operations of such a high tempo and magnitude since 1947. And the Prime Minister then ending it with this speech where he mentioned that, terror talks will not go hand in hand and we are not going to be deterred by nuclear blackmail. This is one of the most historic speeches ever delivered by an Indian Prime Minister since 1947. Rajdeep.
Okay, Sandeep Unithan giving us his sense. General Bhatia and Air Marshal Kapoor will, of course, come to you in the days ahead for a wider discussion on this. I wanted today initial comments. I think we are digesting what Prime Minister has said. General Bhatia, just one quick answer. Do you believe this will deter terror? Will this be a deterrent to terror? That's the worry. Will cross-border terrorism stop as a result?
Yes, I firmly believe it will, because if you look at the terror statistics, they've gone down. After 2016 surgical strikes, there have been no terror attacks outside of Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, so this has taken note of. And now with Op Sindhur, this will lower down the violence levels in Jammu and Kashmir too, because they know that Pakistan has to pay the cost and consequences of terror attack. I'm not saying that every terror attack will will be punished like of Sindhur? No. But they will keep it below the threshold level of punishment, because the cost and consequence of Pakistan are not only in the military domain, they're also in the diplomatic domain, in the informational domain, in the economic domain, and the water, which is very important. Hoon or pani saath mein ho sakta. So nuclear aspects, I think, and just adding to Sandeep, he's covered everything. Even 1999, if we did not cross the LC because of the nuclear, rhetoric and nuclear blackmail, right? So that factor has been removed now. So Pakistan understands that we are not bothered about the nuclear thing anymore. That factor will not be there, and Pakistan will have to pay the cost and consequences of any major terror attack. So that is a very good signal.
I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it there, General Bhatia, Air Marshal Kapoor and Sandeep Unithan. I think we've got a sense in the last hour of what the Prime Minister's speech means in terms of redefining our nature of engagement now with a hostile neighbor. The breaking story coming at the moment. India has rejected US President Donald Trump's claim that he is the one who brought about the ceasefire and that this was linked to trade talks. Sources saying no talks on trade were held and they were not linked to any ceasefire or any understanding with Pakistan. Sources saying no threat from Trump was given on stopping trade if the conflict continued. India angry at the way Donald Trump has again hyphenated Pakistan with India, suggesting that he is the one who brought pressure on both countries to come to the table. Okay, all of this, remember, happened just before Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke out for the first time on Operation Sindhur, addressing the nation. The Prime Minister made it very clear that India would no longer bow down to nuclear blackmail from Pakistan, that terror and talks cannot coexist, and nor can blood and water. It was clear now that India wants to draw a red line, saying they will strike at Pakistan terror infrastructure every time there is a terrorist attack in this country. Listen in to what the Prime Minister said.
कोई भी न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल भारत नहीं सहेगा। न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल की आड़ में पनप रहे आतंकी ठिकानों पर भारत सटीक और निर्णायक प्रहार करेगा। तीसरा, हम आतंक की सरपरस्त सरकार और आतंक के आकाओं को अलग अलग नहीं देखेंगे। मैं आज विश्व समुदाय को भी कहूंगा, हमारी घोषित नीति रही है, अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो टेररिज्म पर ही होगी। अगर पाकिस्तान से बात होगी तो पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर पीओके उस पर ही होगी।
Okay, there you've heard from Prime Minister Modi, tough words that he gave. Let's now get in an opposition reaction at the moment. I'm joined by P. Chidambaram, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, joins me. Appreciate your joining us there, Mr. Chidambaram. You heard Prime Minister Modi, and I'll play more sound bites of him to get you to react. But your first reactions to the Prime Minister's address to the nation, Mr. Chidambaram. Has a new red line been drawn by Mr. Modi when it comes to tackling terror?
He has emphasized past positions of India. He has said it in clear terms. So to that extent, there is no disagreement. Terror and talks cannot go together. Blood and water cannot flow together. We will respond to any terror threat or terrorist act. These are well-known positions, and I'm happy that the Prime Minister has reiterated them in very strong language.
But sir, it is, you're saying the Prime Minister is following a path that is known to, that has also been enunciated in the past. Terror and talks don't go together, for example. But the truth of the matter is, This is a prime minister under whose government now armed forces first in Balakot, earlier in the surgical strikes, and now in Operation Sindhur have gone deeper and deeper into Pakistan, this time striking at Bahawalpur and Murid Ke, the terror hubs. The UPA years, by and large, were marked by what many believe was strategic restraint. To that extent, this is setting a new precedent.
Well, you've heard the generals at the time of the Uri response. You heard the generals give the dates and the occasions on which Indian Army entered Pakistani territory and engaged their adversaries. I think there are 7 or 8 dates, which was all published at that time, and you can refer back to the past record. This is after Uri. Balakot was different. Balakot was a singular strike on an alleged terror base. We'll accept the government's version of that. I have no quarrel with that. We accept that version. Balakot was a solitary instance of an Indian aircraft entering Pakistani airspace and attacking a terror base. But otherwise, when full-scale wars erupted in India, between India and Pakistan, India's done whatever was possible at that time. 1947, 1965, 1971, given the state of equipment and the state of readiness, whatever was possible was done. We are talking about 50 years later. 50 years later, neither technology nor capacity remains static.
No, I'm contrasting, sir, with due regard, I'm contrasting the approach after 2008 Mumbai, that heinous 26/11 attack. You became Home Minister soon after, and what we've seen after Pahalgam. The fact that then there was strategic restraint, unwillingness to cross the LOC. Now you've got air power being used to strike Pakistani terror bases.
I'm glad you remembered that in 2008, I became Home Minister after the attack, after the conclusion of the attack, and after every terrorist except Kasab had been eliminated in Mumbai. Kasab was captured. So this question has been asked earlier of the Prime Minister, then Defense Minister, then Foreign Affairs Minister. They answered, if I remember right, they answered that strategic restraint was the modus operandi that was decided upon. So I can't really add to that. As a Home Minister who was 1 day old after
do you support what Mr. Modi has done? In contrast to, do you believe this is a better approach to send a stronger message to Pakistan?
This is a deterrent approach. It has greater deterrence, and I hope it will have greater deterrence.
Does it carry greater risks as well?
Of course, if the deterrent response naturally carries a greater risk, I think both go together. But then that risk has to be taken. If you want to have a deterrent response, you must be willing to take greater risks.
Let's just hear once again what another piece of what Prime Minister Modi said, and I want you to respond to that, Mr. Chidambaram. Listen into what Prime Minister Modi said in that speech again.
भारत का मत एकदम स्पष्ट है। टेरर और टॉक एक साथ नहीं हो सकते। टेरर और ट्रेड एक साथ नहीं चल सकते, और पानी और खून भी एक साथ नहीं बह सकता। जब पाकिस्तान में आतंक के अड्डों पर भारत की मिसाइलों ने हमला बोला, भारत के ड्रोन्स ने हमला बोला, तो आतंकी संगठनों की इमारतें नहीं, बल्कि उनका हौसला भी थर्रा गया। बहावलपुर और मुरिद के जैसे आतंकी ठिकाने एक प्रकार से ग्लोबल टेररिज्म की यूनिवर्सिटीज रही है। दुनिया में कहीं पर भी जो बड़े आतंकी हमले हुए हैं, चाहे 9/11 हो, चाहे लंदन ट्यूब बॉम्बिंग हो, या भारत में दशकों से जो बड़े बड़े आतंकी हमले हुए हैं, उन सब के तार कहीं ना कहीं आतंक के इन्हीं ठिकानों से जुड़ते रहे हैं।
You heard the Prime Minister there again, Mr. Chidambaram. The big question is, strategic restraint of the UPA years could not deter Pakistan-based terror. Will this new kinetic approach of striking Pakistan in the heart of that country, in your view, act as a more effective deterrent?
I hope so. How can I predict the future? I hope it will be a more effective deterrent.
And do you believe that the opposition will continue to fully support the government on the issue, or will the opposition now raise questions, particularly given the kind of comments that Donald Trump has made, which suggests that he wants to play some kind of a greater role in the region?
Donald Trump's role is a mystery, and the government has not clarified President Trump's role. So those are questions which will be raised separately. That has nothing to do with the opposition on the Congress party supporting the government's deterrent action. Let's not mix up the two. Now, Prime Minister mentioned nuclear blackmail. Now, that raises questions. Was there a nuclear blackmail? When Vice President J.D. Vance hinted at alarming intelligence, and he spoke to the Prime Minister of India and said, I have alarming intelligence. That's what the media reported. Was he referring to a nuclear threat? So those are questions which will be legitimately raised. But those are legitimate questions which has to be answered sooner than later. But that has nothing to do with the opposition supporting the government's firm action, which will have, hopefully, effective and considerable deterrent effect on Pakistan.
Mr. P. Chidambaram, for explaining where you stand, I appreciate you joining us here on the show tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank
P.
you.
Chidambaram, former Home Minister of the country, suggesting that the opposition will support this deterrent strategy, the kinetic strategy that the Modi government has adopted towards Pakistan and Pakistan-based terror. Now, while the doctrine talks of tough action against Pakistan, the escalating conflict that results, as we saw with Operation Sindhur, means that innocent civilians get caught in the crossfire. This time, the border town of Poonch was the worst affected by Pakistan's unprovoked cross-border shelling. And the people of the town are still picking up the pieces. Among the many heart-wrenching stories of civilian casualties is that of 12-year-old twins, Zain Ali and Urwa Fatima. Today's ground report comes from our correspondents Ashutosh Mishra and Kamaljeet Sandhu from Poonch.
Collateral damage, unintended victims of warfare. Zain Ali and Urfa Fatima. 12-year-old twins whose dreams were silenced by a shell that did not distinguish between the civilian and the combatant. Early morning on May 7th, their lives ended, crushed under a wall brought down by Pakistani artillery firing that targeted this residential colony of Poonch along the line of control.
12-year-old Zain and Fatima, two children, were just walking down on the street. The impact on this wall and the shells were all around this, and magnitude of this took all these two kids in the grip, and that led to their casualty. Both the children died in the Pakistani shelling here in Poonch.
मदर थे, उनके भाई दो आए सुरनकोट से, तो वो गाड़ी लेकर इधर नीचे रोड पे खड़े थे। मदर उन्होंने सामान लेकर वो निकल गए। तो जब बाद में जो वो बच्चे दो थे और उनका फादर, तो इतने में वो भी निकले साथ में। तो इतने में वहाँ शेल गिरा, शेल गिरने के बाद वहाँ ही ब्लास्ट हो गया शेल। तो वो इसी जद में आ गए, जो बच्चे भी उनका फादर भी।
Their father, Ramiz Khan, is undergoing treatment at a hospital in Jammu. Urusa Khan, their mother, is shattered. Zain and Urwa had celebrated their birthdays last month. Their relatives broke down as they shared memories.
सैलरी आएगी, कभी मंथ एंड होता है तो 20-25 के बाद, तो कभी उनको बोला जाए ना कि बच्चे पैसे नहीं है, तो बेटा जिद करेगा कभी पापा पैसे दो या ये लेके दो वो लेके दो। तो छोटी बोलती, तेरे को पता है ना अभी पापा की पे नहीं आई है, तो तू क्यों तंग करता है पापा को? पे आएगी तो पापा लेके दे देंगे। अपनी कई बार अपनी जो गुल्लक है वो तोड़ के देते थे पापा को कि अभी आपके पास पैसे नहीं है, आप हमारी गुल्लक में से ले लो।
The family had shifted to this locality only 2 months ago to cut the kids' commuting time to the school. The school where Zain and Urwa studied, within walking distance from home, was also hit by the shelling.
Pakistani army started targeting the civilians in the bordering areas. The Pakistani artillery fired shells on temple, masjid, Gurudwara, and even the schools. Zain and Fatima and many such children came into impact of the explosion fired by the Pakistani army when they used artillery.
At the Jamia Ul Ulum, a madrasa in Poonch, a teacher, Khari Iqbal, died in Pakistani shelling. 2 children were also injured.
हमारे हौसले अभी टूटे नहीं हैं, हम बुलंद हौसले वाले लोग हैं, मौत से हमें कोई डर नहीं है। हम इंशाल्लाह जो है वो ये सारी चीजें सहने के लिए तैयार हैं इंशाल्लाह।
ये मदरसा खुलेगा दोबारा?
इंशाल्लाह खुलेगा, इंशाल्लाह जरूर खुलेगा।
तैयारी कर रहे हैं, बच्चे वापस लौटेंगे यहाँ पे?
जैसे ही ऑर्डर होगा बिल्कुल बच्चे वापस लौटने के लिए तैयार हैं, हम भी बिल्कुल तैयार हैं, हमारे हौसले टूटे नहीं हैं।
Poonch, the worst hit by Pakistani shelling, is still counting its losses. A return to normal life will take time, the healing even more. With Ashutosh Mishra and Kamaljeet Sandhu, Bureau Report, India Today.
And please keep in your thoughts and prayers tonight the people of Poonch and other border villages. They are the ones who really suffer every time there's an escalating conflict between India and Pakistan.